We're in Luke chapter 7, which continues the themes of Jesus' gracious and authoritative speaking, which started back in Luke 4 as Jesus visited one synagogue in Nazareth where they were amazed at how gracious he was, and then the synagogue in Capernaum where they were amazed at how authoritative his speaking was. And now we're continuing to see Jesus speaking with grace and authority. And we just heard the story of the Sermon on the Mount in Luke 6, which in both times, Matthew and Luke, when they tell about Jesus' great sermon, it transitions from there to Jesus raising the servant of a centurion by speaking. And we're seeing that Jesus' words are gracious and authoritative. But then Luke also gives us another story that's only found in Luke of Jesus raising a boy from the dead. It's interesting, John is the only gospel that tells us about Jesus raising Lazarus. Here we have another story of Jesus raising someone from the dead that only one of them included. John reminds us, if I told you all the things Jesus did, I wouldn't have enough paper and ink to do it with. Jesus was showing that he had power over death and that he had power over life and death by his words and by his presence, by his touch. We're going to see that in this. Now, both of the people who are healed or raised here are outsiders. One is a Gentile and one is a dead person. We don't think of a dead person as an outsider, but we're going to see that they're literally kicking this person out of the city because they're dead. They're unclean. They can't be around anyone anymore. And you can't get much more of an outsider than being dead and therefore kicked out of your house to another place. And it's interesting that neither of the people who are healed, the servant or the boy, did anything to deserve the miracle that they got. They didn't even sing well to deserve being able to sit down afterwards like we heard we were today. So that's... They didn't do anything to earn this. All right, so let's read their stories. The first part of the story is in Luke 7, where Jesus is asked to heal this Gentile's sick servant. When Jesus had finished saying all this in the hearing of the people, he entered Capernaum. And there, a centurion's servant, whom his master valued highly, was sick and about to die. The centurion heard of Jesus and sent some of the elders of the Jews to him, asking him to come and heal his servant. And when they came to Jesus, they pleaded earnestly with him, "This man deserves to have you come do this, because he loves our nation and has built our synagogue." So Jesus went with them. You notice even here who they're claiming deserves to have this done. It's not the servant, but the master who deserves, in their opinion, to have this miracle done. This account starts with reminding us that Jesus had just finished saying these things in Luke 6. The Sermon on the Mount just concluded. And that sounds like this is how the centurion heard of Jesus. We've got hearing going on. Jesus is speaking, and what he's saying is spreading. And a centurion is literally a commander of 100. That's what the word centurion means. You can hear the word century in English there. Now, it may not have his group of soldiers he was over may not have been the full 100, but this is a commander over a large group by the name centurion. And it's interesting that he is an outsider, but he's not just an outsider, he's an invader. This is a non-Jew who's part of the occupying force in Israel. This should be a bad guy in the story. But it's interesting that throughout the Gospels, and especially Luke, every time we hear of a centurion, they're doing good things. They're putting their faith in Jesus. The centurion at the cross says, wow, this guy was the Son of God. The centurion in Acts, Cornelius, the centurion, is the first whole household to bring his family to faith in Christ. And A centurion rescues Paul from a mob, rescues him from Jerusalem to where he was held in Caesarea Philippi. Then on the boat, when it's going to sink, it's a centurion who says, "Don't kill the prisoners." You know what? Luke was with Paul while he was arrested in Jerusalem, while he's under house arrest in Caesarea Philippi, while he's on his boat journey, and then in prison with him. Luke is around a centurion, and it's possible that a centurion is with Luke as he writes the book of Luke. He probably got to know them pretty well. And it's interesting that he notes, especially Luke notes, how many of them put their faith in Jesus. But these are, again, outsiders and invaders. This should not be the good guy in the story. Okay? This would be like the invaders, the occupiers of the story. This is occupied France, and we've got one of the German invaders who is, you see what I mean, the parallels to Israel here? Okay, this is an outsider. And he valued his servant, or another way of translating that is to say that his servant was dear to him. He loved this servant. And then he sent some people to talk to Jesus. And Matthew, when he tells this story, he says the centurion said to Jesus, and it's Luke who clarifies that their conversation that they're having is happening through messengers. That's how they're talking. Jesus and the centurion are talking through messengers. And the first group of messengers that come are Jewish elders. This is an official position throughout the gospel. They have a place on the Jewish Supreme Court that's going to try Jesus. These are synagogue leaders. And they plead with Jesus. That word for pleading is the word paraclete, used of the Holy Spirit. It means advocate or counselor. He's like sending the Jewish elders as his official representatives or lawyers to plead his case to Jesus in order to get something good from Jesus. And they say, he deserves to have you do this. That's the opposite of the verdict that the Jewish leaders are giving about Matthew, the tax collector. They don't think he deserves anything good from Jesus. There's about to be a sinful woman later on in Luke 7 who comes and is washing and anointing Jesus' feet, and they don't think she deserves anything. But this guy, they think he deserves to have Jesus give him something good. Why? Because he loves our nation. The word nation is people or ethnicity. It's the same word we get for Gentile. He's from another nation, and he loves our nation. He's not a Jew, but he loves Jews. And he built our synagogue. They're in Capernaum. He built the synagogue that Jesus preached his sermon at, that everyone realized Jesus had great authority. He knows about Jesus probably through that. And saying he built it probably means he paid for it to be built. He wasn't just out there doing the work himself. He's a centurion. But he helped with the building project of this synagogue that Jesus spoke at authoritatively. And then what they're saying that the centurion wants is for Jesus to come to his house and heal his servant. The question is that what he really wants? Let's continue the story here. Jesus was not far from the house when the centurion sent friends to say to Jesus, "Lord, don't trouble yourself, for I do not deserve to have you come under my roof. This is why I did not even consider myself worthy to come to you. But say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority, with soldiers under me, and I tell this one, 'Go,' and he goes, and that one, 'Come,' and he comes. And I say to my servant, 'Do this,' and he does it." When Jesus heard this, he was amazed at him. And turning to the crowd following him, he said, "I tell you, I have not found such great faith even in Israel." Then the men who had been sent returned to the house and found the servant well. All right, so the elders, the Jewish leaders, were talking about how much the centurion deserves to have this done, and now he sends friends to say, "Tell him I don't deserve to have this." Were they kind of over-arguing his case, misrepresenting him? Seems like his friends are representing his faith a little bit more accurately here. He knows that he doesn't deserve good things from Jesus, but that Jesus has the authority to just say it and make it happen. And you notice he even calls Jesus Lord, and his response to that is saying, I don't deserve to have you come. This is becoming a theme in Luke. John the Baptist says he's here to prepare the way for the Lord, who is Jesus, and John the Baptist says about Jesus, I am not worthy to even take care of his shoes, wash his feet. Peter, likewise, when they get the big catch of fish, Peter calls Jesus Lord and immediately says, I'm a sinner, go away from me. And now this centurion is saying, I'm not worthy, you're the Lord, I don't even deserve to have you come over to my house, let alone for you to heal my servant. Acknowledging Jesus as Lord is also acknowledging that we don't have an inherent right. We're going to get good things from Jesus because he's good, not because we're good. And that's part of what the centurion is acknowledging. It's part of his faith here. His great faith is trusting that Jesus has the authority to heal, and his great faith includes the fact that he is not worthy, he's not deserving, he can't come to Jesus and say, you must do this for me. Real faith says, I don't deserve it, but you're the Lord and you can give it. And then he trusts that Jesus can send away diseases just like he could send. This centurion is sending in this story. He sends the Jewish elders. He sends his friends. He says, I can send my soldiers. I can send my servants. And you can send anything. You can send diseases away. And he's right. And then Jesus said, I tell you, he has faith. That's the same way that the soldier said, I tell this one go. Jesus is speaking authoritatively when he says this centurion has faith. Just as the centurion can say, I tell this one to go, Jesus can say, I'm telling you he's got real faith. Jesus is speaking authoritatively to tell us what real faith looks like and that this guy has it. And then it says Jesus is amazed at the centurion's great faith. We're about to see that the people are going to be amazed that Jesus is a great prophet. But for now, Jesus is the one saying, whoa, this is what real faith looks like. You notice also, previously when Jesus was at home in Nazareth, one town over from Capernaum, it says that Jesus was amazed, in Mark, that they had so little faith. Jesus is amazed that his own people aren't trusting in him this way, but that non-Jewish people are trusting in him this way. And you know what? The difference is that Jesus, or the thing that's the same, is that anyone who puts their faith in Jesus is saved by Jesus. Regardless of whether you're an outsider or not, the important thing is putting your faith in Jesus, trusting that he's the one who's good and gives the giver of good things. In fact, Jesus says, I haven't found this kind of faith in Israel. That reminds us we're talking about all nations. But the fact that Jesus can heal at a distance also shows us that Jesus is Lord over all people in all places. Jesus doesn't even have to go to the house in order to heal him because Jesus has authority over all people, all places, everywhere, and everything is what Jesus has the power over. And Matthew concludes this story by telling us that the Gentiles will come from the east and the west and will join in the feast along with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but that some of the Israelites are not going to attend their own feast. And Luke's going to tell us that same thing later in another story about Gentiles, but Matthew includes it here. The point is that Jesus saves both Jews and Gentiles who put their trust in him as Lord instead of trusting in themselves to deserve salvation. Faith, belief, or trust is that Jesus heals, saves, and forgives because he's good, not because we deserve it. That's what faith is. So now we get another miracle where Jesus raises a widow's dead son. Soon afterward, some translations make this the next day, it's like right away, Jesus went to a town called Nain, and his disciples and a large crowd went along with him. And as he approached the town gate, a dead person was being carried out, the only son of his mother. And she was a widow. And a large crowd from the town went with her. And when the Lord saw her, his heart went out to her, and he said, "Don't cry." Then he went up and touched the coffin, and those carrying it stood still. And he said, "Young man, I say to you, get up." The dead man sat up and began to talk, and Jesus gave him back to his mother. And they were all filled with awe and praised God. "A great prophet has appeared among us," they said. "God has come to help his people." And this news about Jesus spread throughout Judea and the surrounding country. Do you notice at the beginning of this story we've got two crowds that are merging? We've got the crowd that's coming with Jesus, that knows Jesus and is following him, and we've got the crowd that's at the funeral, and they merge together. And that happened at Jesus' triumphal entry too, where Jesus comes into Jerusalem and merges with the people who are already there. And what happens here is that this crowd now includes outsiders who don't know about Jesus and insiders who do know Jesus. And this crowd includes the ultimate outsider, a dead man. We're going to see how much of an outsider that makes him. But first, his mother is crying. Remember that a widow, and she's not just a widow, she's a widow with an only son. And actually, in the next 3 chapters of Luke, we're going to see Jesus helping people who have an only child who is either dead or on the verge of death here. And this widow of an only child is the definition of the poor from the Sermon on the Mount. You can't get more of the definition of the poor. In fact, she's even crying. She's weeping. Jesus said, "Blessed are the poor," and then he said, "Blessed are those who weep." Blessed. It's better to be. It's good to be one of the poor or those who weep, who know Jesus, than to miss out on Jesus and have everything else. But Jesus is going to bless this woman. It says his heart went out to her. Some translations say that he had compassion on her. This word literally means his spleen was moved. I guess that's the part of your body right inside by your heart that you can feel in your stomach. You can feel compassion. This word is only used of Jesus and God in Luke and the Good Samaritan, who's very Christ-like. So Christ-like that some people think we're actually describing Christ by the Good Samaritan. But it's God in Jesus who has this kind of compassion. This compassion that is it's a love that motivates Jesus to bless this woman. Okay, now, to show you that this is an outsider, do you know that touching a dead body made you unclean? And because of that, the fact that they're carrying him out of the town, you had to take dead bodies out of the city because death is unclean. So this is the ultimate outsider. You, when you die, become an outsider. You're kicked out of your house when you die. This is a picture since the Garden of Eden of the fact that death and exile are together. And Jesus goes to this unclean outsider, and it says he touched the coffin. Some translations say he touched the bier, a pyre. This is probably an open coffin. It's probably like he's being carried out on a stretcher, that when he touches it, he's not just touching a clean, nice coffin. He's probably touching directly the dead man. And you know what? Jesus has been willing to touch all kinds of unclean people. And when Jesus touches them, instead of him becoming unclean, they become clean. And when the kind of uncleanness that we have is death and cleanness, Jesus' kind of cleanness touches it, the unclean dead person becomes a clean live person. And that's what happens here. But he also speaks. He says, I say to you, get up. Those are the same words that he said, I tell you, I haven't found anyone with such faith. This is an authoritative speaking. When Jesus says, I say to you, get up, even when you're dead, you obey. Jesus is speaking with grace and authority again. This is a grace that is an authoritative grace. This is a wonderful thing that Jesus says to a dead man, I say to you, get up. Which is the same thing he's going to say to the little girl who's asleep. This could be translated as wake up, or rise and shine, or wakey wakey. He's saying wake up, and it works when he says it. And then the little boy, or we actually don't know how young this man is, he's a young man, this man sits up and begins speaking. It's proof of life. It's the fruit of a good tree. He's a living person again, and he's speaking. And we're talking about this news spreading. We share the news of what Jesus has done for us when we come to life like a tree produces fruit. It comes out of us naturally. People who are living want to share their source of life, and it flows out of them. And that's happening with this boy and should be happening with us. And the news spreads throughout Judea, the land of the Jews, which is a reminder that this message isn't only for the Gentiles. Sometimes we could over-argue the case that way. This message is for Jews and Gentiles. But it's for outsiders, whether that it's an unclean Gentile or an unclean dead person. Jesus has come to save us. Now, it says the people were filled with awe and they praised God. And the people are the ones amazed at Jesus this time, which is how it has normally been throughout the story, right? They say, God has come to help us. That word is literally has come to visit us. And it's possible that word, like for us, a doctor visit, could be what is being referred to here. Jesus already described himself as a doctor when he explained why he was going to Levi's house, the unclean one. Jesus is a doctor making house calls. God has come to visit us. And then they say he's a great prophet. Does that mean that he's just a great prophet like Moses and Elijah were, or does it mean that he is the great prophet who was coming, who Moses said would come? See, he is like Elijah and Elisha here. Both of them raised dead boys, and there's some interesting parallels to both of those stories. Elijah met the widow of Zarephath, whose son he ended up raising. He met her at the city gate, which is right where he's meeting this woman. And then the fact that it says that Jesus gave him back to his mother is word for word what it says in the Greek translation of the Old Testament when Elijah gave the boy back to his mother. He just did Elijah's miracle with the same wording. He gave him back to his mother. And then it's like Elisha, who raised a boy in the town called, she was a Shunammite. She lived in Shunem. And this isn't for sure, but probably Shunem is the Hebrew name, and the Latin name for that town is Naam, and the Greek word for that town is Nain. He's probably in the same town in Israel where Elisha healed or raised the boy. So he is the great prophet, but he's more than just a prophet. In two more verses, we're not going to read today. The next part of this story, Jesus is going to be described as the one who was to come. He is the great prophet, not just a great prophet. And Jesus is called a prophet throughout Luke, but he's more than a prophet. He is God himself who has come to visit us. And you know what? It's interesting here. Do you notice who called Luke in this section of the story? Verse 13, when the Lord saw her, his heart went out to her. Luke, as the narrator, is calling Jesus Lord. It's not just the people in the story who are calling Jesus Lord. Luke is calling Jesus Lord. It's interesting. Only Luke and John call Jesus Lord as the narrator. Luke is telling us Jesus is Lord. Now, here's what we've got here. These are the accounts of amazing faith in an amazing Savior. And the pieces that we see here is that resurrections are possible. Luke chapters 6 and 7 has the highest concentration of people rising from the dead anywhere in the Bible, one commentator said. We've got 2 stories back to back in 2 chapters of Jesus raising people from the dead. And one objection to people saying that Jesus rose from the dead is people will say, oh yeah, if Jesus rose from the dead, there should be other examples of people rising from the dead that show that resurrections are possible. Guess what Jesus is doing? He's raising other people from the dead, establishing a pattern that he can raise people from the dead so that when he says, I'm going to die and I'm going to pick my life back up again, I'm going to raise myself from the dead, they already have examples of other people he's raised from the dead. And then Jesus is saving outsiders here, including Gentiles and the dead who are unclean. And again, since Adam and Eve first sinned, we have been born dying and outside of God's presence. We've all been born that way because that's where Adam and Eve were. We're born where they were. And Jesus is coming to fix our 2 greatest problems, which are we are outside of God's family, outside of the feast, outside not able to eat at his table, and we're going to die there. And instead, he raises us to life and brings us back into the family and invites us to eat with him at his table now and forever at the feast. And then, do you notice that we have 2 things that you could, if you just had one of these 2 stories. In the first story, it's the centurion's faith that is given as the reason for the miracle. But in the second story, it's Jesus' compassion that's given as the reason for the miracle. See, we have faith, but our faith is not ultimately what's saving us. Ultimately, it's Jesus' compassion. It's God's goodness that's saving us. We have faith, which is real, in Jesus' compassion, which is real, and that his authority and his compassion is what heals. And I think it's very interesting that in both of these stories, the almost dead servant and the all the way dead son, neither of them can even ask to be saved. It's God's goodness in Jesus that he finds them and he raises them. And even then, when he uses someone's faith in this process, in this story, it's not the faith of the servant, but the faith of the master for the servant. I bet in all of our stories, whether it's our own parents or someone else, there was someone else's faith that brought Jesus to us before we had faith. And that's what's happening in this story too. And this faith is trusting in Jesus' goodness and compassion and authority to heal. And then what happens at the end of this is that news spreads. And Jesus healed by his word, and now we need to hear this news, which is actually summarizing Psalm 107, which we have on our banner here. Later on in that psalm, it says that God sent his word to save, heal, and rescue from the dead. And here we have Jesus' word saving, healing, and rescuing from the dead. And Jesus was moved by compassion, not just to come to our house, but to come from heaven to earth to live for us and die for us in order to give us his salvation. In Jesus, your sin is forgiven, and you are healed or saved. It's the same word. You are saved from death. You are healed. You are forgiven. And Jesus has come near you and is willing to touch you, be with you, accept you. And when he touches your uncleanness, he cleanses you. Blessed are those who are poor. Blessed are those who weep. It's better for you to know Jesus and have bad things happen to you than to not know Jesus and have the world. It's better. It's good. Your faith has saved you, but your faith has saved you because it is in Jesus, who has compassion and authority, not because of you or anything you have done.